Good morning. Do I have an echo? Are we good? Okay, great. Good morning. Welcome to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board meeting on September 13 at 9 a.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I don't see a flag in the room. There you go. There's one. All right, excellent. So let's start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. For those of you that need to, have a seat, please. Thank you all for being here this morning. I'd like to start the meeting by announcing this is a hybrid meeting. It appears as though we will not have a quorum again this month. So I'm going to urge the members of this board to actually do your best to try and come to the meeting so that we have a quorum at least of 6 so we can do business as needed. With that also, with a hybrid meeting, you can watch the meeting online. It's my understanding we do not have public comments signed up for today. However, if you are interested in providing public comment, there's a link on the meeting site in order to be able to sign up prior to the meeting to speak. And we welcome conversation and comments from the public. I'd also like to ask for a moment of silence. This weekend was the 20th anniversary of our 9/11, and we want to honor those that served, saved, and those families and victims of 9/11. And additionally, want to honor and pray for strength and compassion for the victims of COVID-19, their families, along with honoring the frontline workers, our medical folks, our school districts personnel, as well as our emergency responders, to keep them in our hearts and our prayers for strength and wisdom as they go through this process. Thank you. Given that we don't have public comment, I'm going to ask for at this point, but I would like to ask for a roll call for those that are present today. Natasha?
Overman.
Here.
Abel. Myers.
Here.
Rosenwasser. Lott. Powell. Goods.
Here.
Jackson Sims.
Present.
Combs.
Here.
Hollis. Nieves. Strom.
Here.
And county staff, Cheryl Howell
Present.
and Nancy Takamori.
Here.
Okay, Commissioner, we show Christy Nieves, David Hollis, Mark Rosenwasser, Rick Lott, and Cody Powell absent as for now.
Okay, great.
Sasha, I'm
see
here. I
that
think you
Chrissy
couldn't hear me.
Nieves is actually logged on. She may not have been able to respond. Chrissy?
I'm here. Is my audio not working?
We can hear you now. Thank you so
Great.
very much for being here. Also, we did get notice that Mr. Powell would not be able to attend today due to a recovering illness. So thank you very much for his notification, and I appreciate it. The next item on the agenda was the approval of the minutes, but given that we did not have a quorum, we are unable to actually approve the minutes of June 14, 2021, July 12th, 2021, August 9th, 2021. So it's very important that we do our best to try and enter the county building when we have a meeting. There are a lot of precautions that do come into place to make sure that people can come safely to the meeting. So I ask all of our board members to do your best to try and attend the next month's meeting. Next item in the report is the chair's report. I'll keep it brief. I did speak to our local delegation, elected delegates, to hear their priorities. We do have several of our legislators that do have affordable housing as one of their priorities. We did hear last week that there was an effort by the Florida Realtors to support not sweeping the Sadowski Fund. However, they have withdrawn that support. So it is incumbent on all of us to work very hard to help our legislators understand how critically important the foundation of our economy is when it comes to affordable housing, especially given we've seen anywhere from a 12 to 20% increase in rents in our area that are making it incredibly difficult as leases are expiring for families in our community, our frontline workers, our educators, all those folks that are working so hard. Find a safe place to live and be able to afford it as well. Yes, who's speaking?
Councilman Goose.
Councilman Goods, you are recognized.
Did you say they withdrew their support?
They had an attempt to, they were organizing a constitutional amendment to put on the ballot for next year, and that has been withdrawn.
Any inside reason why?
I can't attest to that.
I can send you the write-up that we received, but it's not a withdrawal of support for affordable housing.
That's
My understanding from what I've read. It was just that they, I think, didn't get the support or the signatures that they needed to move forward with what they were trying to do.
exactly.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
And to further, hi, Councilman Goose, this is Ms. Howell. To further clarify it, the Board of Realtors and many of the other affordable housing providers find themselves in a really difficult situation in supporting this measure. Right now, there has been an agreement for a specific amount of money to be put aside for affordable housing each year. And if they lodge that fight, it would open that up to the risk of losing affordable housing dollars altogether, or it be tied up in the court system for 7 or 10 years and no affordable housing funds would be issued. And so they all got together and they agreed to step back from that one. You know, this coming, this year that we're in right now, Hillsborough County received $7 million, which is more money than the county had received. And I want to say in the last 10 years or more. So
Thank you, Ms. Howell. Go ahead, Councilman Goods.
Well, I appreciate the clarification. I'm glad we're getting money, but the problem we have with some of this money is just tied to subsidize, and we need non-subsidized money to be able to help people, and that's just the problem we're having. We can't help the people because everything's tied to some type of subsidy and so many rules and regulations. So this was frustrating to me. Hoping the ARPA money, we don't have to worry about the ARPA money being so tied. That's what I'll be fighting for tonight with the budget tonight, making sure we have money from our ARPA to have non-subsidized money to do what we need to do for these people.
Excellent. Thank you for your comments, because I'm right there with you. I find it rather frustrating that we get $7 million from the state when Hillsborough County alone has made a commitment of $10 million. When Hillsborough County is a donor county when it comes to the escrow dollars that go to support affordable housing by statute. So I encourage everyone to continue to try and work on helping our legislatures understand how critically important the foundation of available housing for all of our workers is to our economy, our strength, and our growth needs. Lastly, I wanted to put out a reminder to and Councilman Gooch, you may need to help me with this one. Put out a reminder to our municipalities. We are still waiting for them to adopt the county's or the language associated with the county's tenant bill of rights in order to address the fact that we need those rights for both tenants and landlords in order to address the impending eviction crisis that we are looking at, but also to make sure that our tenants and landlords have a clear understanding of their rights and responsibilities within Hillsborough County. I know that there's work being done, and it would be very helpful if we could get those things adopted by each of the municipalities, because currently the tenant bill of rights only applies in unincorporated Hillsborough County. Lastly, unrelated to affordable housing, but I think there's someone who, can you identify yourself, the caller that ends in 57, the number call ends in 57? That's Goods? Okay. Okay, if you're not speaking, please mute your phone.
Commissioner, in reference to your question, I'll make sure I touch base with legal when I get in the office today. But I know they sent a memo saying that they're researching everything and we're waiting to just see how you guys are going to implement your process or what have you before they actually bring something back to council to take a vote on. That was my last understanding from a memo that was sent out last month.
Okay. We have implemented it. We've rolled it out with an outreach program. We have informational flyers available. There's also information available on our website. And we've done several press releases as far as it's concerned. It does offer various different resources to both the landlord and the tenant to reach out to various different agencies that can assist and provide information. So I will touch base with or ask Ms. Takamori to touch base with your legal department to answer any questions you may have.
That'll be fine. She could do that. That'll be fine.
Commissioner, can you hear me?
Okay, go right ahead.
Can you hear me? This is Mark Rosenwasser.
Yes, one moment, please. Ms. Takamori?
Yeah, I'd be happy to reach out to the City of Tampa Legal Department.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Mr. Rosenwasser, you're recognized.
Yes, number one, I apologize for being late. Please show me as present. I woke up with a small case of vertigo, so I'm staying at home today. Want to share with you that members of the Legislative Committee of the Bay Area Apartment Association and the Florida Apartment Association are meeting or already have met and are continuing to meet with some of the council persons from the city of Tampa to share their thoughts and support for the tenant bill of rights, and I'm actively involved with that as well.
Thank you for that report. I appreciate that. The goal here is to make sure that all the rules are the same across all the different areas of Hillsborough County. So I'm looking forward to their support of the current ordinance and the pending for each of the municipalities. So thank you for that report. I appreciate that. Lastly, and then we'll move on to the director's report. There is efforts to put together, and we have funding approved by the Board of County Commission to develop an eviction mitigation mediation program. That's moving forward. It's got a bunch of road bumps in the way, but we are making some progress, and pending a proposal, a partnership for legal support of the effort. It looks as though we should have that relatively soon, which is critically important that we get that moving forward, given that the eviction moratorium has been is no longer in place. And with that, Ms. Howell, you're recognized.
Good morning, board. Thank you so much for your for spending your morning with us and taking time out of your day. We have embarked on a journey of exploring what it is to have a CLT be a part of what we're doing here in Hillsborough County, and to really utilize that as one of our most effective tools in our toolbox. This morning, we want to bring back to you Florida Housing Coalition. They were contracted to really kind of expand the view of this work in Hillsborough County, what a CLT would look like, framed up within our business model, and how we might be able to fund that as we move forward. I have Florida Housing staff here, Mr. Ashon Nesbitt, and he will share with you this morning, has a presentation that he's going to share about what a CLT would look like for us here in Hillsborough County. Ashon, are you present? Ashon, are you present?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Great.
Okay.
And we also have Cody Glazer here as well. So I will turn it over to Ashon at this time. Are you able to share your presentation?
He's not muted, so, but we're not hearing him. Sean?
Ashon?
Oh, can you all hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, great. I'm so sorry. We're having a little connectivity issues here where I'm seated. And you were asking about the presentation.
Right. Are you able to?
Yeah, I had asked if, I don't know if Lilette's able to share her screen.
Ashon, I have the presentation ready to go.
Okay, great.
Can you bring that
Great.
up?
Thank you.
And while she's pulling that up, I just want to be very complimentary to Cheryl and your entire staff throughout this process. It's been really good. And for the AHAB board, we've been having several conversations with the staff and working through a lot of the details. And so what you're going to see this morning in the presentation is kind of the results of those conversations. And then, of course, the next steps are, the real work of getting things done. So if you could go to the next slide. So we're just going to start off about talking about what a CLT can look like in Hillsborough County. And again, we're going to talk through some of the things that we've talked through with staff so you can see where we're at and share some examples of what some other CLTs are doing around the state that can be informative as to what a CLT can look like here in Hillsborough County. And then we'll get a little bit more to detail about next steps. Next slide. So these are kind of the main issues we've been talking through with staff as it pertains to the CLT. We know that the CLT, to start off, is going to need operational support. So looking at ways to get that operational support to the CLT, identifying funds for startup. And we'll talk a little bit later about ongoing support for operations, but definitely getting started with staffing, educational outreach, so how the CLT will work with other partners in the community that are already doing homebuyer education, for instance, to do outreach to the community about CLT. We know CLT is not new to Hillsborough County, but it's not as widespread, so there'll be quite a bit of educational outreach that needs to be done. And just the organizing from the legal side, getting papers filed with the state and with the IRS, those types of things, as well as, bringing together initial advisor committee and board to get things going with the bylaws and ground lease and things of that nature. So, a lot of that will be supported through the county. Technical assistance. Of course, Florida Housing is here to do that, and will continue to be a resource for technical assistance. And just generally, overhead costs, stewardship costs, and we'll touch on these later. And looking at a potential source being Hope Dollars for operational support. Access to land, which is key to the success of the CLT. So the ability for the CLT to tap into county-owned land is going to be critical. Access to subsidies like SHIP for purchase assistance. And we've talked through with staff, and we think that primarily if the CLT is doing or involved in development, there will be more on the development assistance side. But in all cases, we'll have to look at how existing subsidy sources can be structured to work with the CLT model, whether the CLT is doing the development directly or the CLT is partnering with other organizations to do development. And then the big thing is long-term sustainability. And what we determine is that a stewardship-only approach is probably not going to be financially sustainable for the CLT long-term. And so we're looking at other activities that the CLT will need to engage in that are both mission-based as well as provide a source of financial stability. Next slide. So in thinking about CLTs that are really closely tied with their local governments, we picked out a couple just to share with you all as examples. So Delray Beach, for example, was established in partnership with the CRA. They currently have about 100 units in the CLT. 91 of them are owner-occupied, and they have 6 rental units that they own. And they also have a contract with the CRA to manage 37 rental units that the CRA owns. And the relationship with the CRA has been really critical to the success of Delray Beach CLT. The CRA pretty much got it started with operational support as well as staffing and other in-kind services. And they continue to have this ongoing relationship with the CRA for operating dollars, as well as the contract with managing the 37 rental units, which provides revenue for the CLT to continue to operate. So this is just one example of a CLT that's really closely tied to the local government. In fact, they operate under Sunshine. That's just how closely tied they are to the CRA. Next slide. Another example is the CLT of Palm Beach County, which was started by the county, but is currently a separate independent 501c3. They have 62 single-family units, and they also have several multifamily developments within the CLT, and they're currently finishing out a 24-unit townhouse process. They started out with $200,000 in operating support from the county for 2 years, as well as land and development subsidy. When you'll see in the next slide or a couple slides down, you'll see how their revenue sources break down. They continue to get support from the local government in terms of development subsidy, lots of corporate grants. They are a high-capacity developer, so they earn a lot through developer fees. And of course, property management fees through the properties that they own as well as manage. Next slide. This is just an example of one of their latest projects called Davis Landing. It was built on county-donated land. It includes 16 single-family homes and 8 townhomes. You can see the aerial view there. And their primary source of gap financing was through home dollars and, of course, through the free land that was donated by the county, in addition to other things such as impact fee assistance that any typical affordable housing developer would receive. Next slide. And so when thinking about both initial as well as ongoing support, you can see here, these are how the revenue sources break down for these 2 CLTs. And really that ongoing sustainability was really a key or a significant discussion amongst Cheryl and her staff, and really figuring out how, once the CLT is set up, how can it maintain itself long term. And you can see how these 2 CLTs are currently doing it. If you look at Delray Beach, you can see that a significant portion of their revenue sources is directly tied to the CRA. through management fees. Again, they have a property management agreement with the CRA to manage the units that the CRA owns, as well as other direct operating support from the CRA. So you can see that there. Compare that to Palm Beach County, which got started with significant support from the county. I'm sorry, but most of their revenue now comes through developer fees and management fees. So you can kind of see the comparison between the two, and really that's been a big point of discussion, is determining which path that the CLT for Hillsborough County would follow. Would it be more in the lines of Delray Beach, or in the lines of Palm Beach County, or maybe somewhere in between? All right, next slide. And so when thinking about initial operations, just getting started, what's going to be needed? So this is just kind of a bare bones 501c3 operating, just thinking about kind of what the CLT might be doing just to get started. And there's going to at least need to be an executive director, and maybe a part-time administrative assistant. So between those two positions, looking at salaries and other benefits and costs, around $155,000. Other overhead expenses, legal, accounting fees, liability, office space. We're estimating at 55, but some of these may be through in-kind things offered through the county directly. So that could be a cost savings potentially there. And if the CLT does receive land right away, there might be some carrying costs related to that land. And so we're looking at around $230,000. This is just an initial operating budget. Depending on how the CLT grows and other things that the CLT does, this budget might increase. But this is just an initial operating budget. Next slide. So with that in mind, just thinking about some of the more detailed things, recommendations for the corporate structure. What we're seeing, where our recommendations are, is that the CLT would be seated by, but still be separate from the local government. So we're looking at an independent 501c3, but seated by the local government. The CLT would be involved in both rental and home ownership, and we think the involvement in rental is going to be very important as far as long-term sustainability of the organization. And some things on the articles of incorporation, just being sure that once it's set up, that the homeowners that own homes that are part of the CLT can benefit from property tax savings, making sure that this language here that you see, acquisition of land to be held in perpetuity, as one of the stated purposes of the CLT, so that you can benefit from the statutory property tax benefits the homeowners can. As far as bylaws, we're going to begin with the model CLT bylaws, and we have those. And we recommend a tripartite board, which is the classic CLT board that includes public members, that's those that are in the public sector, general members from the community, and that's where you would get your expertise as far as affordable housing and real estate development and all of those things through those general members, and then land lessees. So eventually, once there are homeowners in there, you will get the land lessees there. And then we also said consider CHOTO designation, and this might be something for the future for the CLT as we're forming the initial board to look at CHOTO designation. And then as far as board members, then again, the general members having that community and technical skills, real estate attorneys, realtors, bankers, developers, finance professionals, and marketing and property management. Next slide. Is Cody on the line?
Yes, I am.
Could you mind going through the recommendations for the bylaws really quick?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. This is Cody Glazer, the legal director of the coalition. So we also have some recommendations on bylaws here. For those of you who work with organizations that have bylaws, the CLTs is very similar, but there are two. There's something called the model bylaws that the national group created, and so we basically base our recommendations off of that model bylaws structure. So basically, it's the same thing as any other bylaws that you would have, except there's two articles that are very specific to the CLT. And we can talk about that, at a later date. But essentially, they just ensure that the homes are going to be affordable in perpetuity. Different procedures for how to set the resale formula, as Ashon will talk about. But we just have some recommendations for the CLT when it forms about what bylaws to use.
Madam Chair.
Is that Councilman Goods?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have a question?
Can we recognize? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Howell, if you would, I'm not visual, so if you would have this information, this presentation sent to my office so I can review later on this afternoon or sometime this week with the gentleman's information that is given the presentation, please.
Absolutely, sir. We're having this presentation sent out to all of the AHAB members, and we will include his information on there as well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And I would ask that it also be included in our minutes so that it's included as part of a minutes for today's meeting.
Yes, ma'am, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Cody, are you going to cover the next slide regarding recommendations on key provisions of ground lease, or is Ashon?
Yeah, Ashon, are you there? I'm going to cover it. You might be having difficulties.
You may be having some connection difficulties. Why don't you go ahead if you can?
Sure. So also one of the things we've talked about with staff are, what's going to be included in the ground lease down the road. Again, this will happen after the board is set up. But again, something we always train on is we start with what's called the model ground lease. This is a model ground lease that has been approved by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac as for what is considered a best practice lease for CLT homes. And so the board will have to decide some elements of what that ground lease has. Things like income eligibility, just making sure that the persons that are in these homes are in line with certain kinds of funding, like the HOPE program or other sources of funding. The ground lease also makes clear that it's going to be the primary home of the individuals who will be residing in these CLT homes. There's also going to be what's called a ground lease fee. This will be decided by the CLT, but it's essentially a monthly fee that goes directly to the nonprofit to help fund some admin costs. Typically, it's a very nominal fee, somewhere around $25 to $35, sometimes $40 a month. That'll be decided when the board is put together for the CLT. And the most important thing that's in these ground leases is the resale formula. This is the formula that decides, what the current homeowner can sell the home for, 5 or 10 or 15 years down the road. And so there are different kinds of resale formulas for the Community Land Trust. Typically, it's going to be a fixed rate formula, which means that it allows the homeowner to get somewhere around 1.5 to 2% appreciation per year. It allows the home to be affordable long term, but it allows the homeowner to have some appreciation each year. We also have an appraisal based formula where you can look at the amount that the home is appraised if it were fee simple home, and then take like 25 or 50% of that appraisal increase. And that'll be the resale formula. Those are all things to be talked about once the board of the CLT is established and deciding which resale formula to use.
Next slide.
One of the other recommendations, this will also be handled later down the road, is a CLT is a very community-based organization, meaning that there also need to be education done for the local property appraiser. Florida law has very specific standards for how CLT homes are going to be appraised for property tax purposes. And so it requires working with the property appraiser's office to make sure that they're aware of the specific laws that govern how a property is going to be assessed. Because CLTs are not fee simple homes, the statute here on the screen basically directs them to assess the property like there are resale restrictions on the property, which there are. So this is a very important statute for CLT purposes. Also, it's just general education. It's good to know that homeowners are eligible to receive a homestead exemption for CLT homes. And so down the road, just work will have to be done with the property appraiser's office to help them understand where the CLT homes are, how they're going to appraise the property, how to give them the homestead exemption, and things like that. I'll turn it over to Sean if he's here. I'm not sure if Sean has made it back.
He's online, but we're not hearing him yet. Yeah, there we are. Ashon?
I'm back. Can you hear me? I'm so sorry.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Great. So recommendations for property disposition.
Did we lose him?
Did you all lose
I think
me?
we lost him again. Ashon, are you there?
Connection's not really awesome. You're in and out a little bit. Just wanted to let you know.
Yes. So on the property disposition system, this is, I know, one area that Cheryl and staff are still talking through as far as kind of the mechanics of how this will work. But just wanted to focus on the kind of recommendations for when properties would flow to the CLT, or when the CLT would be the priority. And that's in the second bullet point here. And looking at developments, for example, that are along, key transit corridors, bus rapid transit, or even future rail. So these are areas where, we want to get affordable housing developed and permanently a part of the development around those station areas, for example. Looking at developments that are part of, large-scale redevelopment efforts, anytime that the county is putting a significant investment into a redevelopment that could potentially create a displacement risk. And so analyzing where that exists and making sure that there's permanent affordability as part of those redevelopment efforts. And also looking at locations, if the county, for example, gets property that's in a pretty area of choice, or, a good area where, prices are significantly higher than the county median price, and looking at sales prices as well as rent. These are areas, again, where, if property is obtained in those areas where we will want to achieve and maintain permanent affordability. And so these are kind of like the decision tree. And so the idea is that the CLT in these instances would be prioritized in terms of receiving county-owned land through the disposition process. And then in the other cases, you may want to have a preference for CLT, and some of the considerations here, and again, still talking through the procedures for property disposition, and then looking at the existing preference for perpetuity within rental developments, and how that currently works with the county working with the HFA, and looking at how that mechanically works now and how it would work looking at a ground lease, for example, versus the typical deed restriction in LURA. Next slide.
And Ashon, this is Cheryl. If we could just stop there for a minute. So I want to say that affordable housing and the county attorney's office did meet with the purchasing director, because we wanted to make sure that in disposing of the property to the CLT, that we didn't run into conflict with any issues or rules or regulations that we have to follow. And so we did meet with them last week. Nancy, are you there?
I am, Cheryl.
Yeah. Nancy, if you could just share kind of the outcome of that meeting.
Absolutely. Yes. So Cheryl and I met with the Director of Procurement Services last week, and he confirmed that the procurement policy does not apply to the disposition of land, and that we could recommend that land be provided from the county's inventory of lands, surplus lands available for affordable housing, be provided directly to a CLT. And that would require us to modify the current policy we have for the disposition of those properties. And I probably recommend we have at least some general criteria for which lands are appropriate to be distributed to the CLT in that policy.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that report. I think it's also important for us to recognize that in consideration of the surplus lands, which we've had significant discussions and meetings on, in identifying properties that would be appropriate for affordable housing, but also the surplus homes policy that actually, surplus property policy that we have in place where lands that the county owns, the disposition of those properties actually come into to be available for affordable housing. That being said, there is also a criteria that I don't think we discussed when we talked about surplus properties, about ensuring that properties that are in fact developed for affordable housing where the county or the CLT is considering those properties, that consideration of flooding risk is something that we need to take into consideration. There's an issue out there right now that's being discussed regarding HUD selling properties that are in flood zones that do present a risk to buyers. So we want to make sure that we have that in our criteria as well. But I really appreciate these items because they do give us a great idea of how we do this. Question, when it comes to the disposition of the property, does the CLT become a broker? Because we're doing real estate transactions, I assume, but is there a brokerage requirement affiliated with the CLT if it's a nonprofit?
I don't believe so, but Cody, if you could weigh in on that, Cody or Ashon.
Yeah, typically, so the CLT board will have a bunch of realtors on the board to help with the brokerage, so you're not paying those fees, and the fees can be better suited to build the housing and to do outreach for homeowners. I don't know if I answered the question, but you typically just use the collective experience of the board to help with these sort of brokerage services.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
That's great. Ashon, are you speaking? Okay, go ahead, Cheryl. I'm sorry.
And so I'd like to add that Affordable Housing Services is updating the policy at this time. And we're also looking at some kind of guiding principles for us because, we don't want the CLT to be in competition with some of the nonprofit activities that are going on right now. We want that to be able to complement what we're already doing. And so this is really timely for us. So as we go into developing our next 2-year biennial plan for HOPE, which we'll be bringing back to this board in November. And then we're going to be including all of those things, including an updated a policy for disposing of the properties and the guiding principles that will help us differentiate, what type of properties would go to a CLT and what type of properties we would keep in house and go out through an RFP for affordable housing services and the nonprofits that we work with. So, please note this will not eliminate some of the activities that are currently being done through the nonprofits and the public-private partnerships, because I think those are critical. Those partnerships will allow for a 25% share of developer fees, which provides some unencumbered funds for our nonprofits. So we understand the math behind it and how supportive that can be. And so this is not to replace that, but to complement it.
Excellent. I don't see any other hands or questions, and I'd like to actually reiterate 2 items that are listed on this particular slide regarding recommendations for property disposition systems. The 2 items under disposition to the CLT could or should be required for. The 2 items that I'm most concerned about in order to assist in stabilizing communities and to assist in what we are seeing is a significant displacement and difficulty in building wealth building and middle to low income communities is the second and third bullet, development that are a large part of a large scale redevelopment effort that creates displacement risk. And then secondarily, the development in locations where sales prices and rents higher than the county median. That includes almost every bit of our urban area right now. Every bit. When we look at the median housing prices for Hillsborough County, the median housing price is above the first-time home buyer program in Hillsborough County. So this is a tool to be able to address bullet 3 because it gives us the ability to allow those neighborhoods to stay intact and to be able to actually live and either purchase and or rent in the community of which they've lived historically, but have found that home prices have increased and rental rates have increased so fast that the displacement is significant. And we're seeing that right now. So I'm very encouraged by seeing this presentation. Are there additional slides that we need to discuss? Because I have a couple of questions I want to ask.
There are a few more slides.
Okay, go ahead.
And again, we were talking about the real work that begins after this is looking at how we can blend or allow other subsidies to work with the CLT. And so we have some model SHIP purchase assistance language that's been pre-approved by Florida Housing Finance Corporation. And so we will be continuing to do is work with staff on how to implement that language within purchase assistance strategies under SHIP and other funds. We talked about utilizing the resale option for home funds. Although those won't be immediately available, could be something down the line, and also implementing language for CLT and development strategies. And we've been working on some model language for that. And so really the main consideration here is being able to retain all of those subsidies. We know that typically in affordable housing, there's 2 or 3 subsidies, even in home ownership sometimes, to make it work. So being able to maintain all of those subsidies in the unit is something we'll be looking at going forward. Next slide. And as far as the activities of the CLT, of course, stewardship, being kind of the permanent steward of the units that are developed within the CLT will be part of the CLT's activities. But looking at the sustainability of the organization itself and how the CLT could be a resource, an additional resource to the county. And so looking at program management, for example, of key programs, we know that the county is working on a density bonus program, for example, and this could be something that the CLT could manage on behalf of the county. And as far as serving as a co-developer, and this is really important here, particularly in rental developments, not to be a competitor or another developer in the field, but serving as a co-developer, for example, with a tax credit developer or another nonprofit to achieve permanent affordability, particularly when the land is owned or is going to be transferred to the CLT. And that's a way that the CLT can earn developer fee or a portion of the developer fee that can be used to maintain the operations. Next slide. And so recommendations on initial staffing, we talked about this earlier, but definitely hiring an executive director and an administrative assistant. And looking at that executive director, someone that has competency in community engagement, because that's going to be a key activity at the very beginning, as well as project management. And should the CLT start to do other things, program management, for example, hiring some additional staff, for example, a housing manager that can coordinate client intake when they're working in partnership with a property manager. Next slide. And so these are kind of the initial things that the county would do as far as capacity building. the board recruitment, operating funding, initial properties, working on structuring subsidies, and helping with community engagement, and then ongoing support, operating support where possible, public land, continuing to funnel land into the CLT, and other subsidies for land acquisition and project financing. Next slide. And about the Florida Clt Institute, again, we talked about Florida Housing Coalition continuing to be a resource. We have a CLT training and certification program that was developed in collaboration with Freddie Mac, and also with some support from Fannie Mae as well. Recently, we created a new primer, if you will, that really lays out all of the best practices. So that combination there with the training and the certification program that we do, which provides some coursework, some self-evaluation, technical assistance, that really ensures that the CLT is established according to best practices nationally, as well as some of the requirements that Cody went through with the legal requirements in Florida to take advantage of all of the property tax savings and those things. And so we really make sure that the CLT is started off with a firm foundation through the training and certification program. Next. And so some recommendations for community engagement, of course, starting with the AHAB, which we're doing today and maybe again in the future, up to Cheryl. Affordable housing developers and partners, homebuyer educators, counselors, really making sure that the entire ecosystem in Hillsborough County understands the CLT, knows its role, and how everyone will work together to continue to expand affordable housing. Next slide. And these are some more key recommendations. We have a home buyer education module that our CLTs are using. And this is kind of what we recommend as far as home buyer education. Once those homes are starting to be developed and you're sourcing potential purchasers, working with the existing home buyer counselor and education agencies. And we recommend that what they would do is kind of introduce the CLT as part of their standard education, and then refer those folks over to the CLT to do a little bit more detailed one-on-one going through this home buyer education module, which really walks through in detail the ground lease, some key provisions of the ground lease, making sure folks understand the resale formula, for example, understand how they can make the transition from CLT homeownership to fee simple homeownership and preparing for that. And one of the things about this course is it does have some evaluations for the attendee, because you really want to make sure that folks, before they get into CLT homeownership, that they truly understand what they're doing, that they truly understand the provisions of the ground lease before they sign and close on their purchase, because you don't want folks coming back later saying, you know, I didn't know that I had a resale formula that I can only sell my house for this much. And so those are the types of things you want to make sure that folks have a clear understanding of before they sign, and to let them know that they have a choice, and if they can do fee simple, they absolutely should. Next slide. Lending for CLT purchases, just really quick. We know that CLTs have a free, so it's a very safe investment for lenders. And so the CLT does provide that stewardship as an additional resource for the homeowner, particularly if they're in a situation where they need some financial assistance to get out of a default situation, for example. Because of the provision of the ground lease, the CLT does have the ability to cure defaults. And that's just one example of how the CLT serves as a steward and partner with the homeowner to make sure that they maintain success, and one of the reasons why this is a really good investment for lenders to have the CLT there as well. And recently, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae have really simplified their processes for working with CLTs. They used to have a very complicated process. You had to underwrite the organization, for example. They've pretty much eliminated that. And as long as you're using the model ground lease, you're good to go. So they've made it very, very easy for lenders to work with CLT. But with all that said, there's still quite a bit of education that needs to take place at the market level. And we're definitely here to help with that. Next slide. And these are just some of the lenders that are currently working with CLTs. And we expect this number to grow, particularly now that Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae have really streamlined their processes. And next slide. And as far as next steps, we're recommending the formation of an...
Did we lose Ashon again?
I think we lost him, Commissioner.
He's online. We just can't hear you, Ashon.
Cody, could you step in?
Yeah, so here are our final recommended next steps, basically a summary of the presentation today. So the first would be, of course, to form an advisory board to start with planning efforts. And then at that point to form the initial board, which includes finding the volunteers with all aspects of the housing industry to be a part of that board, and then incorporate that entity. Then you'll need to hire an executive director, draft legal documents, and then some of the next steps that we're going to be working with staff as well is how to incorporate some magic CLT language into your existing programs, such as the HOPE plan, which we're working on now, as well as incorporating some CLT language into SHIP and other county programs. And then after, once the entity is set up, once you have an ED, once you have your ground lease, that's when we can really work on community engagement activities. Basically, a lot of education to be done on what a CLT is, how it benefits homeowners, how it can prevent displacement. So a lot of opportunities there for community engagement. And then the final next step we recommend is to enter the new entity into the training and certification program that Ashon spoke about. But again, the first few ones here, I think are very timely, very important, which of course is to form that entity that will be the CLT.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is that the last slide? Great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
could you go back to the last slide, and then I have a couple of other slides I want to work to. Cody, this is the Affordable Housing Advisory Board.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to establish a separate board to just with the planning efforts, or can that be done under our current structure given the diversity of members of our board?
I think it can absolutely be done under this current structure. Of course, with Cheryl's direction on what next steps are needed to get the board together. The CLT board, I think, is really the step right now. So I think this board can absolutely be the launching point for recruiting the members for the CLT board.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And can you go back to the slide that broke out the income streams and possible structures? I'm not sure. I didn't see slide numbers, so I can't tell you which one it was, but keep going.
keep going back.
Yeah, it's within the first, say, 10 slides. Somewhere around there. Stop, go back.
Right.
Go back.
Go back to this one.
That
Yeah.
one.
Mhm.
Okay, what I really like about this one is that for two reasons why the CLT for Palm Beach County and TC are attractive for multiple reasons to me. There is, self-sustaining fees is part of the structure, and multiple income sources is part of the revenue stream. It also, if I'm understanding it correctly, given that we have multiple CRAs all over the county, most of them are in the cities, it would be difficult, in my opinion, to work it through a CRA versus having it be, a county-wide program in partnership with, obviously the municipalities playing a role in the public official board, whatever board. When you say public entities for the board makeup of the CLT. And we want to make sure that stakeholders are at the right stakeholders are at the table when it comes to commitment to the CLT. But the next slide, if you don't mind, please, talked about the initial operating budget. And we saw the various different steps that need to go into place. I have two questions. You know, this CLT project has been on our agenda for quite some time. And I'm the type of person that likes to put my foot on the gas pedal rather quickly. And I know that Cheryl's been working on this for a long time. Ms. Howell, our director, and Ms. Takamori have worked on this for a significant amount of time. Obviously, there's some coordination that needs to be done at the county level. But given that we don't have a quorum to take a motion to move forward on the CLT and then motion to recommend a structure, I'd love to have some board input on, maybe on a consensus basis, as to the best method to move forward, and identification on whether or not this operating budget should be included as a recommendation to the Board of County Commission for budgetary allocation in 2022.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir. Councilman Gooch.
Two things. I think with your last statement about motion or consensus, I think maybe today, if you can get a commitment, I'll give my commitment to make sure on my calendar that I'm at the next meeting, that we can still move the meeting, past meeting minutes, and try to move this agenda item today. I think that would be a good starting point. As it relates, you talked about the CRAs. I would say mostly all of the CRAs are in my district. That's why I asked for the presentation and the gentleman's name, because I'm going to probably at the next CRA board meeting that we have in October, see if I can get the gentleman to probably make a small presentation in reference to the CLT as it relates to CRAs, and maybe we can get something, a relationship going with our board and see what they feel about the CLTs and how they work. So those are the two things. My recommendation, I'm going to recommend to my board and see if I can get with the gentleman in reference to him coming to a virtual or whatever for our next CRA meeting in October, possibly, or when they're available. And also, I would think you asked for a commitment today for members today to be ready for next month's meeting.
Excellent, thank you.
Commissioner, this is Cheryl. One of the things we may want to consider as well is that, you know, we're looking for support from the AHAB board, so it's not necessarily, doesn't have to necessarily come to a recommendation. I want to say that this needed to go before the AHAB board, because we love your support, and then we want to bring this to the BOCC. So this presentation essentially will go before the BOCC so that they understand what a CLT is, apart from us including it in the 2-year plan. And so I think that's critically important. And so I just want to say that this was the first step in identifying what the CLT would look like, whether or not there is support within the AHAB board for it. And so I'm not sure, and I guess, you know, I could ask Nancy, does this need to come in the form of a recommendation, or could we gauge the board on support at this time?
I don't think a vote is required, and certainly support could be gauged. I do think that the issue will come back to this board when you're reviewing the biennial plan and the modifications to the surplus property policy. So you would have an opportunity to, you know, vote at that time, and hopefully we would have a quorum at that meeting.
Okay, great, and that does help me understand. But my question is, it pertains to this particular slide. If Affordable Housing Department has actually allocated the administrative support for those efforts in 2022, or whether or not they might be an effort that could possibly be funded through American Rescue dollars. I'm just asking, I don't want to find ourselves in a situation where we've not allocated the appropriate resources to move forward on this until next year's budget. So
No,
could you help
yeah,
with that?
so I understand the question clear now, Commissioner. What I want to say is that CLTs are currently included in our HOPE plan. And so this is something that we could support through our current biennial plan. And as we move forward, our biennial plan goes before the Board of County Commissioners. I want to say it goes before the Board of County Commissioners in December for the next 2 years. And so it would be included in those activities. And those activities are specific with set-asides in there for budgetary implementation.
For 2023?
No. For 2022. So
Excellent.
the budget year 2022 will be approved in August or in September, right?
Right.
It starts in October. This plan comes after that time to say, okay, we have the $10 million of HOPE funding, right? And then we lay out for the next 2 years how that funding could and should be spent for housing activities.
Excellent. Doesn't hurt that I asked for another $1 million for affordable housing in the flag meeting either.
Not at all. It doesn't hurt.
Just asking. You know?
It
Okay,
really
well,
helps.
great.
I do want to address this though, and I'm so glad that you brought it up with some of the carrying costs increasing. We probably, and this is to the AHAB board at large, need to be looking at about $250,000 here. Just looking at many of the costs increasing in everything that we're having to carry out here.
Madam Chairman.
I am not sure who's speaking.
It's Karen.
Yes, you're recognized. Ms. Jackson Sims? Yes.
Cheryl, could we get with that last slide that talks about the things that need to happen to get us from planning to implementation stage?
Yes.
Could we get a timeline, tentative timeline, so that in our minds, or at least in my mind, I know what we're looking at and what we're trying to move towards. So we're looking to have an advisory board in place by X date, and to handle the incorporations, get someone on board, and move these documents through legal, and launch date for the CLT.
Ms. Jackson Sims,
yes,
you
ma'am.
are right on
We can
you are
work on
right
that.
on my mind. That was going to be my next question. So thank you very much for asking that question. Realistic expectations for the board for moving forward. Cheryl?
Right. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. We can work on that. And Commissioner, remember that we need to bring this back to the board. We don't want to get too far into the weeds, into the work without having the BOCC approval. So our next step is going to be probably to set up a subcommittee within the AHAB to start working on those items. We're simultaneously going to be working to get this on the BOCC agenda. And so this presentation will come from Florida Housing Coalition and from staff collectively. And then we'll come back to the board on, forming an advisory board, recommendations for my current board members, looking at the formation of the initial board, setting up a interview panel for an executive director, working to see how we can get the legal documents drafted up. But I am looking at most likely to get into really all of the I want to say the mechanics of this work. Probably around December, as soon as we get this approved, but the subcommittee needs to probably get started right away. So in our October meeting, we'll be asking for volunteers for a subcommittee for this particular CLT activity.
Okay, that helps. So we have a meeting scheduled for September 22nd. Do we need to bring this presentation to the Board of County Commission on that date so that we're ready for putting together the working group in October, or committee in October?
Natasha, are we beyond the deadline or for the
We have
September 22nd meeting?
We have time.
We've already passed the draft agenda deadline, but we have not passed the final agenda deadline.
That is correct.
Okay. So, I can put in a request to the county administrator to see if she would accept a walk-on.
I can put it on the agenda for the 22nd on Thursday.
Okay, great. That will work.
Okay.
Madam Chairwoman, this is Mark Rosenhaus. I'd like to be recognized.
Mark, you're recognized. Mr. Wasserweiler?
Okay. Thank you. As I recall, we've already got an advisory board that met, I believe, once, and then stopped when it was decided by this committee to bring in an outsider to take the lead. Can that board serve this purpose?
I would not object to that, although we've had new members added to the board since then, so I believe it would need to be basically reactivated, but at this point, the existing members that are on that committee could be retained, and then I would recommend that, Natasha, if you wouldn't mind reaching out to the rest of the board members to ask of their interest, recognizing there would be at least a monthly meeting to move this forward rather quickly, because there's a lot of decisions that need to be analyzed so that we can come back to the board in November. Is that correct, Cheryl?
December.
In December, as part of the biennial plan approval and recommendation to the board?
Yes.
Okay, so indicate your time. Take a look at what your ability to commit to several meetings between now and November. And if you have previously been on that board, we'd love to see you return. And if there are any additional board members that have added to the board since then that are interested, please indicate your interest in Natasha, hopefully within the next week or so. Thank you.
The only other follow-up question.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Rosenwasser. Yeah.
The only other follow-up question I had is, how confident are we on 230K? Should that number be up to cover any unanticipated expenses, maybe the 250 or 300, so that we don't hit a roadblock due to funds?
Well, we're not currently making a recommendation for that dollar amount at the moment. So
Okay.
that was a good framework to help it manage expectations for the actual setup cost, exclusive of our administrative costs at the county level to support getting everything up and running. Does that help?
The other thing that's not mentioned in here, Commissioner, and also to Mr. Rosenwasser in terms of what costs may be, is the county oftentimes sponsors a nonprofit to be in a building. So I would recommend that Affordable Housing would sponsor this nonprofit to have office space in one of our existing sites.
Does that help, Mr. Rosenwasser?
That would be wonderful.
I thought so too.
And I want to say, I think it's important to Ashon and to Cody to have that one point included in this presentation as well. So when we go before the board.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You'll make note of that.
Yes.
Excellent.
We will.
Now, are there other questions of Ashon and Cody?
Excellent report.
Excellent.
Right.
Excellent. I'm really excited.
Mr. Thank you very, very much for this work. I know that I know you've been working on it for quite some time. This is excellent presentation. I look forward to revisiting the actual document again. I'm glad to see that we can include it in our minutes to make sure that it's available for presentation. And I will work with our staff and with Cheryl's staff to get it on the agenda for presentation to the overall BOCC so that they understand the options that we would consider, and that we will be establishing a subcommittee or advisory board to continue with the planning efforts to move forward. Unless I hear any objections to move forward, and hearing none, thank you, gentlemen, very much for your presentation and for your hard work. And thank you, Ms. Howell, for helping move this forward. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Cody. Thank you, Ashon. I really appreciate you. So I'll be reaching out to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you all.
Cheryl, you're recognized.
And I will move on to the next item on our agenda. There is an upcoming conference training, the FCDA conference, and that's the Florida Community Development Association's conference. And we'll be making that conference available to all of our AHAB members, just as we did with our Florida Housing Coalition conference. It's certainly set up a lot different. We're gonna have a legislative update on there coming from Ms. Jamie Ross and Ms. Yolanda Cash Jackson. There's also going to be some industry talks. We're gonna highlight one of our most recent public-private partnership projects in this conference as well. So I'm looking forward to it. And Professor Strom, well, all of you will receive the link for the conference. The cost of the conference is free. And so, I want you to invite, your students to participate in this. This is a way for them, especially your public administration students, to really get connected with people who are working in the field, and it could be their next employer. So it's a really, really good panel and platform to work from. So I encourage you to send your staff, engage, find out what's going on all over the state, and so if somebody's already doing a great job at it, we certainly want to copy it here. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I will move right along to board alternates. And so we had and just want to report back on the board alternates. Nancy?
Yes, ma'am.
Nancy, you're present. Could you speak on the board alternates?
Absolutely. So at the August 4th Board of County Commissioners meeting, the board adopted a resolution providing that the agencies and local governments that select members of AHAB may select alternates, and those alternates serve for the same term as the primary member. And in the absence of the primary member, they can vote and participate in discussion. And with the hope being that that will, allow us to have a quorum much more easily. And those alternates will go through the same process that the regular members do. The agency selects them, and then they get put on the Board of County Commissioners consent agenda for confirmation of the appointment.
Great. Thank you so much. We also have the recently approved Board of County Commissioner agenda items. Are there any questions, any comments about anything that's gone forth? And that's included in your package? I can answer those questions at this time.
Could you, just kind of going back to the last item, so those members that are eligible for an alternate, which of our board members are eligible for an alternate, and have we sent them the information so that they're aware that they have an option to have representation at a board meeting?
I don't know if the information has been sent to them, but the members would be the cities, Plant Cities, Temple Terrace, obviously the Board of County Commissioners, HART, the HFA, the City County Planning Commission can select alternates, and the other positions that weren't mentioned that make up the 11 are selected directly by the Board of County Commissioners.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
And Commissioner, I can check with Luann to make sure that any information that needs to be sent can be sent to her. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any comments regarding the commissioner agenda items that have been presented. Would you like to move on to the Affordable Housing Services report?
I would like to move on. You know, one of the things that I want to say is that, so I came back to you, I want to say about 6 or 7 months ago on a 10-point plan to the AHEB board. Next month, I'm going to be coming back to you with that same plan, giving you an update of where we are. I think that's really important that I keep you updated on what's going on with any of the items that's included in that, whether or not we had to pivot from an issue, whether or not we're moving on, where we are, how much has been spent, and what's going on, so that you'll have knowledge. So when people out in the community ask you, hey, what's going on with affordable housing, that you'll have some answers for them as well. So I just want to better equip the board and really communicate with the board a little bit better about what we're doing, because, we get so busy oftentimes in doing our work until we really don't do a really good job at telling the story. And so I want to bring back an update to this board so you'll understand just the work that the staff has undertaken and kind of give you an overview of that as well. So I'll be coming back to you next month on that. And federal, state, local grant updates. I can tell you that the county is going to be receiving $10 million, an additional $10 million of home funding. The federal government has not outlined all of the guidelines and the regulations for this funding. So we were notified, I want to say about 60 or 90 days ago about the funding. They still have not issued regulation. And so we still don't have access to the money either. And so I'll keep you posted on that and on any other dollars that are coming out. So as dollars are announced, please know that sometimes announcements come and sometimes the ability to apply for funds come, but sometimes it's a delayed measure as well. So for state finances through DEO, I would like to say that the county did receive an award through Affordable Housing Services of $1.1 million, and it's to add on some for additional services or strengthening of one of our park projects. And so we also received an additional $2.5 million to help out with acquisition and rehab of an existing motel as well. So we're yet to go into full contract, but we have received award letters on those. And these are in addition to our regular entitlement funds. We have to compete for these funds. And so we have gone after them because we understand the economic impact that additional funds make to our communities. They help create jobs in our communities. They help strengthen our services and our buildings where our most vulnerable populations, they depend on those services and on those structures, especially in time of need. And so we will continue to go after additional funds as well. And so I'm really, really proud of us being able to receive those funds. It was a highly competitive application process. And last but not least, we included our monthly newsletter. And we're going to provide some updates on that next month as well. But we highlight stories. This month we have RTTB included in there. And so, many of you who do participate in our CDBG or our homeownership projects, you may see one of your projects listed very soon. So, we got great projects going on all over this county. We have economic development type projects. We got projects going on out in the university area, projects going on over in East Tampa. And so you may see one of your projects or one of your recipients really soon on our newsletter. So thank you so much for serving, and thank you for spending your morning here with us.
Thank you, Ms. Howell, and thank you everyone for being here today. We also allocated, or at least have set a range in the American Rescue Plan dollars for efforts in the area of affordable housing. Would you like to elaborate that, please?
Yes, ma'am. So the Board of County Commissioners supported a recommendation from our county administrator for a range of up to $35 million for additional affordable housing activities. We are looking at how we can aggressively go and preserve properties throughout the county so that we can, I want to say, limit some of the displacement and ensure that when everything settles down, that there's some degree of property left for people who are low and moderate income to rent. So right now we're seeing prices just skyrocket, 2-bedroom going up $1,800. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so we are looking at acquisition rehab primarily of existing units, conversion of units, small motels, whatever properties are out there so that we can acquire and rehab for affordable housing.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other hands mentioned. Any future business items that need to be addressed?
I just want to say, and believe it or not, that was a competitive process too.
Oh, I knew that. Ms. Combs, you're recognized.
Good morning. Thank you for the presentations. It was very, very helpful today. My question, I actually just got a reminder that popped up on my computer. 1 year ago today, we actually got a presentation of the maps of available land and the excess land, and just wanted to find out where we are with putting those out to RFP, or if there's a timeline for that.
Yeah, Sarah, thank you. And so you and I spoke last week about the RFP. So we had one particular property that we were trying to include in this RFP. We were not able to because of some I want to say some extenuating issues. So we went back to the 17 properties and they are going out for RFP. So I'm looking for them to be posted any day now.
Excellent. Thank you. Ms. Combs?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Madam Chair.
Who do I hear? Mr. Rosenwasser?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Recognized.
Thank you very much. Two things I wanted to bring up. Despite the end of the eviction moratorium, I know a lot of my staff at their on-site properties throughout the county and the municipalities, as well as in other areas of the state, is working with social services to continue to try to get residents to apply for funding that's available. In effect, when we've been forced to go before a judge or magistrate regarding an eviction proceeding, one of the things we have our attorney do is ask the judge to ask the defendant if they have made any efforts on their own, either on their own or through the social services, to obtain money, or are they just sitting back and waiting for deadlines? And if they have made an effort, we are asking for a continuance so that people can stay in their homes as long as they're showing that they are making an effort. The second item I wanted to bring up was that HUD, I believe 2 weeks ago, came out with a report that was part of the president's plan to create, preserve, and sell nearly, I believe it was 100,000 additional affordable homes for homeowners or renters across the country over the next 3 years. I would ask that those on this committee and anybody that they could reach out to, 100,000 units in this country is a spit in a bucket, to use an expression. I mean, we could use that in the state of Florida, let alone maybe even closer to home. So I would ask that we reach out to Congress or anybody we can to get HUD to figure out a way to come up with a policy that increases that by at least tenfold to seriously affect the number of affordable rental homes and homes for sale.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. We've heard in Hillsborough County alone, we have 54,000 people that are house burdened. So, I mean, that would be half of what they're talking about. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. If you have a link to that, Mr. Rosenwasser, would you mind sending that to Natasha so that she could distribute it out to each of our board members for
I would.
discussion, not only at our local state level, but also to our federal legislators? That would be very helpful.
I will do so.
Excellent, thank you. Any other hands? I don't see any other hands or any other comments, future items. Seeing none, I will thank you all for being here very, very much and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.